Well, hello there. It is good to see you again, and welcome back to Path to Abundant Living. I am your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with you all today, and as always, I'm joined by my guys. That's Mr. Matt Nordman and Scott Morrison of Morrison Nordman Wealth Management, and we're going to be covering another, of course, wealth management related discussion here on the show today. And throughout Matt and Scott's time at Morrison Nordman, they get asked a lot of questions, as you would imagine, from different clients, and really surrounding a handful of different topics. And today, what we thought would be beneficial to you guys, our audience, is to take a handful of those topics and do a deep dive into all of them. So today, what we're going to be doing is identifying 7 things that you should be doing right now. These are timely topics. These are timely action items that you can address for you and yours and your financial world so that you can position yourself towards that path to abundant living that we talk so much about on this show. So we've got 7 things that we're going to be diving into today. The first one will kickstart our conversation. But before we get into that, of course, let's bring the guys out. Scott, Matt, it's good to see you guys this morning. How we doing?
Ryan, good morning. Doing well. Scott, great to see you as well. How you guys doing today?
Ryan, hey Matt, good to be here.
Yeah, it'll be good to be back with you guys. We've got our work cut out for us. 7 big topics we're going to be diving into today. First one here is a big one. We've mentioned it a lot on past episodes. This idea of powers of attorney. Again, this is 7 things you should be doing right now. First one, powers of attorney. We've talked about it in past episodes. Why don't we just set up what is, or the powers of attorney, but then also why it's so important and people should be addressing this right now. Matt, I'll throw it over to you to get things started, and then of course we'll just kind of open up the conversation.
Sure. Sounds good. So with powers of attorney, what you're doing is you're allowing someone else, in the event that you can't, to step in and make decisions for you. So the two that we talk about a lot and is medical powers of attorney and financial powers of attorney. And a lot of people know, oh boy, if something were to happen, it would be nice if someone were able to step in. And so we see it a lot with clients who are maybe caring for their parents, or older clients who are like, boy, if something were to happen to me, I want one of my kids or my kids to be able to make those decisions for me, whether it's again medical or financial. And the reason you want to do that is legally, right, with all the in place, whether it's the hospital or medical facility is going to need legal proof that says, yes, you can make decisions for this person. And so what a lot of people do is, I get my estate plan done, or should have some sort of an estate plan done. And that's where the powers of attorney will come into play. And so for us, I say myself, my wife and I, it's like, we get the trust done and the powers of attorney. And you're like, okay, well, a lot of people are like, well, I don't need that or whatever. And one that's really big is for your kids when they turn 18. This is a really big one that a lot of people don't think about, is having those powers of attorney for their kids if they're going away, like maybe they get their first job and move out of the house, or they go away to college, and having that medical or financial power of attorney for them. Now, again, the likelihood of something occurring, probably pretty small, but it's more of that peace of mind of having that in place.
Yeah, I would probably just, expound on that with the children in particular, because we're so geared towards taking care of somebody who is, visibly needing your help. I'm somebody that you would say, hey, I know that my elderly mom needs my help. You don't typically think of an 18-year-old needing that kind of help, especially if they had to have decisions made for them. So obviously it's a dire situation where an 18-year-old can't make their own decisions if they're incapacitated in that way. And so oftentimes that's the one that kind of sneaks under the rug that we don't really catch. So I think that that one in particular is one that we are starting to ask a lot more questions about.
So one quick story, Ryan, is, so have some friends who their daughter went away to school and was having some physical difficulties, and the school's like, we can't help you, or we can't give you any information whatsoever. But their daughter was in, physical distress. and there was some big issues and they didn't have any legal recourse because their daughter's 18 years of age. And so,
Yeah, that's tough.
yeah, it was very tough to watch them go through it.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this, guys. I mean, this is one of those that seems pretty darn important that we should be, it's not one that should fall on the back burner, but I get the sense that it kind of does for a lot of people. Do you find that in your conversations with clients or maybe just folks that you know out there at large, they're like, oh yeah, we'll get around to it, or it's something that we plan to discuss, and it's like, well, hold on, you should be like, this is something you should be addressing right now. Is that a common thread, or do you think most people are on top of this?
Yeah, I personally think that, that's why a discovery process is so important, that you really don't leave anything to chance, that you're asking that question of your clients each time you meet. Because if you just kind of assume that, they've taken care of their own estate planning or of their own legal structures, whether it be with medical or financial powers of attorney, it's just natural not to think of a child being somebody that's going to need that kind of assistance. But Matt just described the perfect situation where, these people were without any recourse. They had no way to help their daughter. And basically all decisions were being left up to potentially a doctor who's, just the doctor obviously is going to try to do what's in the child's best interest. But with those medical powers of attorney, then the parents certainly are going to be, or can be a lot more involved.
Yeah, that's the one thing then when talking with people, whether it's first time meeting them, I've told many people, hey, look, if we never speak again, going through the discovery process, and maybe it's not going to be a good fit, whatever. But I say, if you don't have these in place for yourself and you and your spouse, do that, as well as if you have kids, have them do it as well. Once they're 18, and we would challenge you, Ryan, if you and your family don't have it in place, I would make sure that you get it in place.
Sure, absolutely. I've got my notepad here. I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's kind of in the same way. Taking care of that is, maybe not in the same vein of the word an insurance policy for you and yourself, and knowing that you have that peace of mind that we've taken care of a pretty important item for us and our family. I do want to shift over to the idea of insurance policies. So we've covered different insurance policy related conversations on the show: life insurance, property insurance, property casualty. But when it comes to the wide array of different insurances, what do you guys see with regard to, something this whole episode is what you should be doing right now. 7 big things people should be doing right now. What do you see in the realm of making sure the proper insurances are in place?
I would first start with the idea that I would spin the topic away from insurance and really start talking about what is it that you need to protect, and from both a personal standpoint, a business standpoint, because then obviously insurances could be a natural segue into that conversation of what do you need to protect. Because if it's your income, it certainly could be life insurance that you need. If it's if it's the liability related to owning a home or your car, you want to make sure that you're obviously properly insured. But when it comes to a business, it might not necessarily mean insurance. It might mean having the right legal structure for your business. Make sure you have, the LLC that would protect in the event of any liability to the business, that it doesn't carry over to your own personal assets.
Yeah. So when, excuse me, like Scott said, first and foremost is determine, okay, what is it that you're trying to protect? And insurance is, which Scott and I have talked about this a lot, is insurance is you are shifting the responsibility to someone else to help in the event that something occurs, right? So for pennies on the dollar, right, if you have to replace your home or your car or whatever, right, that's going to be a lot of money. Whereas if you pay the insurance premiums, you're covered. So first and foremost, figure out what needs to be protected, whether that's personally and or professionally, and then dive deep into each of those and talk with the insurance experts and really delve into what makes the most sense for you, right? Do you need life insurance? Do you need, the liability insurance? Do you need long-term care insurance? Do you need, disability insurance? Like, there's so many different ways, right? And so it will give you peace of mind, kind of like having that, powers of attorney in place. The insurance can give you peace of mind, but make sure that you're protecting what needs to be protected personally and professionally, first and foremost.
Well, Matt, you were just rattling off a handful of different insurances, and I think from the general individual's perspective, it's like, oh gosh, there's so many insurances, there's so many roads to take in order to make sure I have my home. But I love that. I love the way that you guys just articulated in that. Okay, what do you want to be protected from? What do you want protected? That's a better way to, I think, from the layman's perspective, to identify their insurance needs, as opposed to, okay, what do I have again? I have a car, I have a boat, going through their assets and thinking about it that way. I like that perspective. That's good.
So one quick example,
go ahead.
right? So you see a lot of people who want to diversify their portfolio, and so they will get into rental properties. And so one thing that they'll do, we've seen this a lot and help people navigate through this, is they're like, oh, I'm going to pick up these 1, 2, 3, 4 rental properties, and they put them in their own name. Well, when you put those in your own name, well, now all of a sudden you have just opened up any liability that happens at that rental property to anything that's titled the same way. So, right. So if it's in your name and this is in your name, well, guess what? All of it's opened up to a potential unjust lawsuit. Well, and then the other thing is, so now you've created this LLC, which now you've insured it properly. Well, have you named your LLC on that insurance policy? So if you haven't named the LLC so there's so much that goes into it. So again, first figure out what you want protected or needs to be protected, and then go from there.
Well, yeah, and then we're obviously during that whole process, we're going to determine how, where you're at in your financial life in terms of your ability to self-insure. And as Matt had said before, what is really insurance about? Insurance isn't about making a state larger or make your financial situation better. It's about making you whole in the event of a loss. So, if you have the assets, and this is going to happen over the course of your lifetime, you may end up developing less and less need for life insurance, let's say, because you've been able to save successfully enough that now you've replaced that you've mitigated that risk, so to speak. And maybe the insurances that you need are no longer needed for income, but they might be needed for now estate planning reasons. So just understanding too that in each of these situations, once you have some of those things in place, that's not the end all be all, and that it's going to be a fluid situation as your needs change over your lifetime.
And one quick thing about that, Scott started talking about, well, now you start looking at estate planning, right? There's so many aspects that go into using or adjusting your insurance depending on your estate plan. And then you start looking at, okay, do you start using irrevocable life insurance trust? Or there are so many different things. And a lot of people hear the word insurance and you can see the eyes gloss over and like, I don't want to talk about insurance, right? And again, it's starting with, okay, let's look at the bigger picture, like Scott was saying. What's the big picture here? What are you trying to protect? What are you trying to achieve? And then use the tools that are available.
Sure. So to bottom line this point here with insurance, I mean, yes, it's a complicated discussion. There's a lot of elements at play. So this is a discussion that you should have with your wealth manager. Go through that process and identify, where are your pain points? What do you want to have coverage for? All right, guys, moving to our third item here on these 7 things you should know or you should do right now. We've heard, I've heard this idea of pay yourself. Pay yourself first. Primarily it's usually, I want to say it's used more in the language with business owners themselves, but I would like to get your take on this idea of pay yourself first. What does this mean and why should people really be doing it right now?
Well, I first think back to when I had that first conversation with my kids when they got, to the age where they were starting their first careers and had a little bit of money in their pocket. And it wasn't just, dad throwing them a few bucks to go to the movies with. And then they actually had to make decisions about, what they're going to do with their income. And as soon as you have a little bit of money in your pocket, the first things you think about in terms of, especially as a young person, is that independence. Get that car, get that house. And what I try to encourage my kids to look at is say, pay yourself first. Decide what you're going to save first. Work down from there, so that at the end, whatever's left is what kind of car you can afford, what kind of home you can own. And so I think when we talk about pay yourself first, we're really talking about, first looking at those things like your employer plans that have matching funds that are available. That's free money. You want to make sure that you're getting out ahead of, that savings plan, because we just got done talking about insurances and things where, insuring yourself when you don't have the assets to protect yourself with. The whole goal is to get to a place where you've got the kind of assets that don't necessarily need to have that much insurance. And, the idea that when you're paying yourself, you're building, the proverbial nest egg. Well, what's the nest egg supposed to do? It's supposed to create passive income. We all have a pretty good understanding of what, the direct income is. We have to trade time for money. We have to go to a job. We have to work for that. But ultimately, as we kind of talk later about what we want life to ultimately be like, once we've, worked hard and saved well, once we've had that kind of lifestyle we want to have, well, there better be the passive income that supports that. So passive income does not come without saving first.
Ryan, two things. One, Scott talks about passive income. We love pigs, passive income generators, and we could spend a whole lot of time talking about pigs. But for the first 18 to 22 years of our lives, we are, I like to use the term, we're an employee, quote unquote. It's the best job you can have because you get housing and food and a lot of times transportation at very little cost to you. Well, then, like Scott's saying, now all of a sudden you're 18, you get your first job, or maybe you go to school and then you get your first job. Now you got, this pile of cash in your pocket. You're like, holy moly, I'm new car, new clothes, travel, whatever the case may be. And so, love that, Scott was saying is like, figure out, pay yourself first, put money away first, get the matching from the 401k. If you're the business owner, make sure that you're, taking advantage of whether it's different retirement plans or ways that you can put away cash pre-tax and paying yourself first. Again, there's the personal as well as the business side of things that, paying yourself first and then generating those passive income generators so that down the road, make your money work for you. Well, that's what those pigs are.
Sure. And it sounds to me, not only is it like pay yourself, whether it's yourself or your business, but there's also the timing of it. It's pay yourself, your future self, that is, so that you're setting your future self up for success. Scott, did you have anything else you want to chime in?
Well, I just think so many people think of, the investments, being that way to start to save. And obviously there's a lot of different ways to create passive income besides just investing. Investing is what's going to build essentially a savings account with some vehicle other than a CD or a money market at the bank. You may be using stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, that you name it. There's a whole world of investment products. But when you start thinking about, okay, like Matt had alluded to earlier, the classic passive income generator is if somebody buys some income producing real estate and then with developing that is able to then buy another piece of property and then buy another piece of property, and that income starts to come in while you're essentially sleeping. There's money coming in. That's the kind of passive generator that you're kind of looking for. So whether it's happening with your investments or whether it's happening with a business franchise, whatever it could be, the idea being that passive income generator is only result if you've paid yourself first in some fashion or other, whether it be through the investment or even taking on debt. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's ways to take on debt in the purpose of buying a business to create a passive, a passive income.
Yeah, when I was looking at the list this morning, guys, I'm excited to dive into that one. But before we get to talking about debt, there, Scott, I want to circle back to and hit our fifth item on this list of 7 things people should be doing right now. And that fifth item is this idea of having an end goal in mind. Now, I know you guys know because we've been doing it on the show. In fact, I think we spent a whole episode talking about goal setting and the right way to go about goal setting so that you can achieve the desired results. I mean, how many times in our lives have we made a goal, and you mean it too. You want to get it and you want to achieve it, but it just feels like there's a mountain in front of you, and by chipping away at it you'll never get there. So talk to me about this idea of having an end goal in mind and why it's important and why people should be doing it right now.
Scott was talking about having these passive income generators. Well, if that's what you want, and that's where you're envisioning, okay, I want that mailbox money where while I'm sleeping, money's still being generated. Well, you have to have a plan. But you need to know, where is it that you want to be? And that's part of one of the things that we get into with the discovery meeting and then the regular progress meetings is, okay, like Scott was saying, things change, right? Your life changes. So where do you want to be, down the road? What is kind of that in where you envision that end stage, which knowing that end stage is going to change. And like you're saying, Ryan, there's going to be obstacles in the way, but focus on the gains that you're making toward that goal. But know, hey, here's where I'm trying to get to. And maybe sometimes you need someone to challenge you to say, okay, Ryan, where do you really want to be? Is this the spot you want to be? And have someone go through with you and ask you a lot of good questions of, okay, is the goal to have a place down south, or I like to travel the world, or I want to spend time with my grandkids, or create this epic memory for my family? What's the goal, right?
Yep. I think that one of the most difficult things about setting a goal, especially if we're talking about setting up one that's so far down the road, if we're talking about retirement, what's retirement going to look like 30 years from now? It's hard sometimes for a 25 or 30-year-old to think, that far down the road. And so one of the things about setting a goal in that regard is it has to be measurable. It has to be something that you can be accountable to, because so oftentimes we set a goal, and as you mentioned, Ryan, you get frustrated because it becomes so overwhelming, because you don't assess it incrementally. You don't kind of do that review along the way to say, okay, am I heading in that direction? If I'm not heading in that direction, what got in the way, or what's in the way? How do you hold yourself accountable? Because I think if it's not measurable and you can't be accountable for it, you're going to get very frustrated because it's not magically going to happen.
Sure.
You get focused on the day to day, and it's hard to take a step back and see that big picture and realize that, you're trying to get, that journey of 1,000 steps, right? Well, you've already taken, 300 of those steps, but every one has been just the slog, right? And you can't see that you've made a lot of progress. And like Scott said, if you're measuring the progress along the way, you can say, oh, look how far you've actually come. Yeah, you still got a ways to go, but you've made a lot of progress in that. And so measuring it along the way, like Scott was saying, and really having someone walk alongside with you is really, really helpful.
That's the key right there, guys. I don't know about you guys, but boy, whether it's like making sure I get out of bed and get to the gym, or like doing these things that I don't necessarily want to do, but I got to it helps so much for me personally to have somebody else to help hold me accountable, somebody to lean on, some sort of guide. Better yet, even if it's somebody who has maybe even achieved that goal and they know what they're talking about, they've done this challenge and they've succeeded and they know what it takes. So having that person to walk that path with you and help hold you accountable, I know is really really key for me in achieving some of my goals. So to that end, if somebody has a end goal in mind, like you said, Matt, whether it's that house down south, to travel the world at some point in their life, who's a good person to help them down that road?
That's a great question. So a lot of times it can be a significant other, a really good friend, or it's a professional in your life, right? So when looking at if you're a business owner, or you're the family member who's kind of in charge of the financial aspect of life, it's like having someone that you can go to, whether it is your financial advisor, wealth manager, or a friend, where you can say, okay, here's what we're trying to, and write it down, talk with somebody, if you really talk with somebody about it and have someone who's willing to challenge you to achieve that goal, right? But it's someone that that you can have really good, open, honest conversations with of, hey, we're doing great, or hey, we're struggling here, and what's the reason that we're struggling, and how do we move past that? Because there's, like you had said, right, there's going to be obstacles in the path, whatever it is. And so, okay, how do you have someone there that can help at times motivate you, at times push you, at times challenge you, and it's someone that you trust, that has your best interests at heart.
We have, even in our own practice, Matt and I have our own coaches. We have a coaching program that we participate in where I can tell when we're excited about going into a meeting with them, because we're ready to address all of the steps that we've taken. We're ready to, because we've set some goals, we've set some some tasks and some action steps, and we can go in and say, yes, we've done those things. I can also tell when we're not ready for that meeting. There's a little bit of anxiety because we're getting ready to talk to the coach who's going to ask us about if we took those steps. They're going to ask us to assess, are we where we said we were going to be? So, some of that anxiety is what you need when somebody's holding you accountable.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more, guys. This is good stuff. And again, for any folks out there that want a deeper dive into goal setting, we did a whole episode talking about the power of effective goal setting. I'd recommend heading back and checking that out, because that was a really good one on this topic. Guys, I want to get back to what a point that Scott made earlier about this idea of debt and analyzing debt. So number 5 on our list of these 7 things that people should be doing right now is this idea of a debt analysis, and that's for the good debt or the bad debt that exists in your life. Scott, do you want to tee this one up, because you did make a mention to it earlier, but why should somebody be doing this assessment? Of course, you want to know what debt exists in your life, but let's get
Right.
into the weeds of it. Why do you want to do this analysis so that it has these
Well, yeah, and I think a
tangible
lot of it's
results?
because people get caught up in the idea that all debt is bad.
Sure,
I think they're surprised sometimes when we have conversations about debt, and they expect the first thing we tell them is, oh, you have to get rid of debt. There's no question that if it's bad debt, you need to, like high interest rate credit cards that you're,
27%, 27%
27%,
talking to somebody the other day.
Yeah, and you don't have the income to even make the minimum payment. Now we're in trouble. But if we're talking about, buying a business that's going to create that passive income that we were talking about earlier, then you have to make there's a calculated risk involved in borrowing money smartly, so that at least that the income that whatever that debt created, if it was a business, well, that income, if it's outperforming the rate of that debt, well, then that's what we would determine to be good debt. It's something that certainly you want to hopefully get rid of, but if you're being really successful, it might mean taking on more and more debt as you develop your business.
Yeah, so Scott can agree with this. So years ago, we had a third partner. Well, he went to do full-time mission work, but we had to buy out his share of the business. And so you look at that and say, wow, you're going to go into debt to buy out. Well, then you look at the long term and say, okay, is it financially wise to do that? Well, yeah. And then you look at, okay, some people live their life leveraged, meaning just borrowing as much money to do all the things that they want to do, knowing that, okay, I'm leveraged this way, but what I'm using those funds for is going to increase in greater value than what it's going to cost to pay down the debt. And so debt necessarily isn't good or bad, like Scott was saying, unless it's that, 27 to 30% interest rate credit card or things of that nature. But it's not necessarily good or bad. It's how does it affect you, and is it a smart decision with your money?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a fundamental difference. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was gonna say one of the things that we're finding ourselves talking about more now with the Fed, the aggressive Fed policy with 10 different rate increases over the last year and a half, is obviously mortgage rates are much higher. So we're having conversations with clients that are a little bit different than when we were able to go out and get a mortgage for 3.8%. Okay, so when people are asking about back then paying off their mortgage, we would question whether they're saying, well, I've got this much extra in my investment that's been averaging 8 to 10%. Shouldn't I take this out and pay off this mortgage? Well, we all like to feel debt free, but you've got to ask yourself a question. Do you want to take out of a pot of an asset that's earning you 10% to pay off something that's making 3%? Or I'm sorry, that the debt, the debt on the drag on it is 3%. So, but today that conversation is totally different. Now somebody's looking at buying a home that could have a 5, 6, push 7% mortgage rate. And now you've got to say, okay, now what kind of planning do we need to do if we have this kind of rate to contend with in the long term?
So all that,
yeah.
Just one more thing about that, Ryan. All that being said, when you look at debt, we can come at it with all the logic in the world, right? And like Scott was saying, well, hey, if your mortgage is 2.5, 3, and you can earn greater than that, over the time, then the smart decision would be, okay, don't pay off that particular debt. But by the same token, you have the emotional side that plays into money, whether it's on your personal or business side, saying, just some people are like, I don't want debt. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but I don't like debt. And so, okay, then you have those conversations, say, okay, how do we address that? What's the smart decision in your situation to make you feel most comfortable with what it is you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, Matt, I like that I appreciate you mentioning that, because yes, I mean, money is emotional. I mean, we've talked about that on episodes. We all have an emotional connection to money, and sure, if you have all the money in the world, but you have all this debt as well, and maybe it's good or maybe it's bad debt, but either way, that debt could make you not feel great about all the money in the world that you have, along with all the opportunity in the world that you have via that money. So I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
one
that.
quick question, or well, I'll ask you, Ryan. Have you ever met anyone who was upset that their house was paid off?
Can't say I have.
Right.
Can't say I have.
So you kind of balance it out, right? And say, okay,
Right.
Does it make sense? And they're like, yeah, my mortgage is 2.5 and I refinance, but I really want to get my house paid off. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You can't argue with someone who says my house is paid off and I don't have to worry about that anymore. So
that's true. No, good point. Good point. Guys, last 2 points here on our list for the 7 things people should be doing right now are a little bit more intangible, if you will, of a concept. It's about thinking about your financial world as a whole. First of number 6 on our list, this idea of identifying your legacy. We've talked about legacy planning, the importance of legacy among business owners that maybe are going through succession planning efforts or exit planning efforts, and legacy isn't just this lofty idea. I think that a lot of people can think that it is. Oh, it's my legacy. What do I want when I'm gone? Until they're like in that moment, you're later in your life, you're on the cusp of retirement. Maybe you're deep into retirement. I feel like legacy, personally, maybe you guys have a different thought, is one of those things that people don't start thinking about until it. Not that it's too late to start thinking about, but maybe. So give me your 2 cents on this idea and the importance of identifying your legacy and why people should be thinking about it right now, even if they're not in the throes of retirement or right on the cusp of it.
Yeah, I'll start. So with legacy, what most people think is, oh, I'm going to put my name on a building at the university. That's not what it's about. I mean, that might be what it's about, but it's really about, you have achieved something in life. And whether it's you've built a business or not, or you worked at a career for, 20, 30, 40 years, but you've reached a level where now it's okay. And it doesn't have to be at the end of that. Like you said, Ryan, it's never too early and never too late to start thinking about what is that next step for your family and or your legacy, right? Where whether you have kids or not, or you want to have that impact in your community, right? Most people won't, and your kids probably wouldn't know, what is your why? Why did you do all the stuff that you did? And it's having conversations. You don't necessarily need to tell your kids or your beneficiaries of the charity of, oh, this is the number, right? But it's having the conversation of, this is why we did what we did, and this is what we would like to see happen. Because you can put in a ton of legal structure around it that says, personally, it's like, okay, my kids at this age get this, and at this age they get a little more, and then they get the remainder of it. Well, if they don't know why we're on the road, Scott, to Youngstown, Ohio, 3-4 nights a week, right?
Right.
Seeing clients and doing all that kind of stuff. It's like, but if they don't know why, by the second or third generation, if you haven't planned for it, then you'll see, okay, there's no connection to that why, and it can go away. So it's having discussions with them and helping prepare them for whether that might be, if they're able to get 50 to 100,000 or millions of dollars.
Right.
I mean, you give a 20-year-old 100 grand. Are they thinking about the long term, or are they thinking about new car, trip to Cancun with my friends?
Right. Yeah, I think a lot behind what's behind that legacy is, sometimes we think about legacy and the first thing we think about is what's going to happen after death. I like to think of legacy starting, I've tried to set a model for my kids. I think that's the first step of the legacy, and it's happening right now. You're trying to establish that relationship with your kids, that this is what dad's all about, and what mom's all about, and what we as parents would love for you, how we can support you and all that, and start developing not only our legacy, but what's your purpose in life, and how's everything that we've done and the hard work and the financial well-being that we have, how does that enter into the equation of carrying on a legacy or creating one? I think at retirement time, for example, you might not be going to work every day, but you certainly may be talking about how you're going to use your wealth, whether it be through philanthropy or foundations, charities, that kind of thing. Or it might be simply to say, you know what, I'm going to start shifting some of these assets to my kids. I'm going to give you some money, son. And having a discussion about what is the purpose of this money? What's money mean to you? What have I taught you about money? Those are the kind of discussions that we're talking about when it comes to legacy.
So one quick story. So we had a client who he was getting near the end. Well, when we first met him, right, it was he had received an inheritance from his parents, came from a big family. And one of his goals was, I want to make sure that I leave to my 5 kids at least as much as that was left to me. Right. And we're like, that's a great goal. And so we got there and we got towards the end, but he had some meetings with family, but not enough, to the point where, fast forward now almost 10 years later, and of his 5 kids, 2 of them still have the money that they had received because he was able to leave more than what he had been given. But the other 3 of those 5 kids, they blew it all. It's all gone. Like, there's nothing to show for it. And so there was some discussions, but not enough. And sometimes it takes bringing in a facilitator to help, who's, for lack of a better term, a disinterested third party, to have those discussions with family members, so that in the end, everybody understands, well, what did mom want? What did dad want? What was what was their why? And how do we honor them with their legacy going forward?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the third party facilitator to help in that process, because that is is a tough conversation and set of conversations to have for a matriarch and patriarch to talk about, life after they're gone and sit their kids down. I mean, it takes real effort to go through that, and not just once, but ongoing with their kids, so that yes, their plans and their hopes and their for their future and their legacy is adequately conveyed. And guys, in your experiences, do you find that when families maybe do utilize that third party facilitator in, let's say, their wealth manager, that the results might be there a little more, or let's just say the conversation gets through to the inheritors more?
Yeah. Well, guilt is a great motivator, right?
Yeah, sure, sure. Good
But
point.
in some cases, I think if we're talking about the kind of wealth that's generational, where, the children, the heirs are going to have more than enough to live an abundant lifestyle, and the benefactor is a little bit concerned about, the excess wealth. Well, that's when you really need to start bringing in not only a facilitator, but probably have legal structure as well that ensures that something you may have already established, not something that is out there, just floating around as an idea, but if there's actually foundations or charities or things that are existing because of what you do, you want to make sure that those go on in perpetuity. So maybe you need to have the kind of legal structure around it that protects from the heir that didn't quite get the message.
That's a really good way to put it, right? It's the Warren Buffett, right? Because he is not leaving his massive wealth 100% to his kids, right? He is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I want to leave them enough that they believe they can do anything, but not so much that they'll do nothing, right? If you give a 25, 35, even 40-year-old, $5 or $10 million, their motivation may change from getting up and going to work every day, right? And so it's having those discussions with the family. Again, they don't necessarily need to know the number. You can share the numbers with them, but having them understand the why and what it is you would like to see, kind of that family mission statement, or the family governance and what it is that the family wants to achieve.
Sure. No, guys, this is good. Let's shift now to our final one, and rather than looking at beyond kind of when you're gone, the legacy, let's look at the present. Your life. We always talk on this show, about living this, amazing life of significance. Heck, it's in the show name, Path to Abundant Living. Talk to me about this idea of that amazing life of significance, what people can be doing right now to position themselves towards that amazing life of significance, so that when it is time to hang their hat up at the end of their life, they can look back with a smile. What could they be doing right now to make sure that they do smile at the end of it all?
So sit down. If you have a significant other, the two of you kind of look at what is that life that, if you said, okay, which we know it's not a perfect world, but if we could have this, and if you don't have a significant other, just take time on your own, get away from the day-to-day busyness of everything that's happening, and sit down and say, okay, if I could have the most amazing life that I could possibly envision, what does that look like? And you may never get to that, it's, reach for the stars and all the cliche, but really say, okay, Ryan, what is it that you really want? What do you and Julie really want to do in life, and the things that you want to achieve, and the places you want to go, and the charities and the community you want to impact, and saying, okay, let's then engineer backwards. What do we need to do to get there? And all, the things that we've talked about today are going to be, big steps in getting you to that point.
Yeah, I think too that, having an understanding of what your capacity is financially. I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting down with a husband and wife, and they're both public school teachers, we're not going to have conversations about the foundation that necessarily they're going to start 30 years from now, unless there's some significant inheritances. So, identifying what's abundance to them. Well, abundance to them might be, something totally different. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be wealth. But if, as an advisor, I want to know intimately what's most important to them about their lifestyle and what it is they're trying to do for their families, their kids, their communities. And if it means that abundance to them is, being able to take a vacation once a year, then that's what we're going to work toward.
Yeah, exactly. Like Scott said, what someone else's amazing life is doesn't necessarily need to be yours. I spoke with someone yesterday and they're like, with everything that's gone on in the last few years, and they're seriously considering retiring from what it is that they're currently doing to take a part-time job doing something that they love doing, because they realize, I don't need a lot of stuff in my life. I don't need to make the level of income that I'm currently at. And so what really is important is spending more time with family, with her sister and with her kids and with her grandkids. Like, that's what's most important. Okay, well then let's work toward how you can achieve that.
Yeah, Matt, I like the comment you made at the very beginning of this, all of talking about a life of significance, is get away to start thinking about this, because this is a deep thought process when you're like thinking about what you want your life to be. I mean, this isn't just something that you bang out over a quick 5 minute
Right.
cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
This is a deep conversation with your spouse or your partner. This is a deep conversation with yourself, and if you want to identify what your ideal future, that life of significance looks like, it takes a little disconnecting. And I can totally understand, that story you just shared of the individual that would want to move towards a part-time because A, they love the work, B, they get the family time. It's checking a lot of boxes for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it can sustain their lifestyle. So it's finding that sweet spot of what works for you from a logistical standpoint, and then what is desirable, I think, for you from a lifestyle standpoint. So lot of good stuff. And guys, look, I mean, we just covered 7 things here today. I mean, there's a laundry list of things that people can be doing right now when it comes to their financial world. But with these 7 things, I'll rattle them off again. We talked about the powers of attorney, we talked about proper insurances, the idea of paying yourself first, having that end goal in mind, assessing your debt, both the good and the bad debt, making decisions based on that debt. 6 being identifying your legacy. And then, of course, we rounded it out here with this amazing life of significance concept. Fellas, for any of our audience members out there that, one of these I'm sure there were many topics here that resonated with them, but if there was one in particular where they're like, I really should talk to somebody about this, and just open up a dialogue, what would be the best way they could get in touch with you and your team just to open up that conversation, just to start getting some feedback and maybe go to a realm of conversation they haven't necessarily had the chance to do yet? Well, how could they get in touch with you guys?
Sure, Ryan. The traditional way, pick up the phone, 517 333 7967, or go to the website, morrisonnordman.com. Click on, there's a link. You can request more information. We can set up a get to know you call, spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes and figure out, okay, what's the next best step after having that conversation.
Awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate you both and your time. We'll let you get back to serving your clients and doing what you do best. But looking forward to being back on the next one. I think we've given a lot of considerations for our audience today. This is a good one. So thanks, and I'll see you soon.
All right, Ryan. See you. Great day to you, and Scott. We'll see you soon.
All right. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. And hey, guys, we want to take one final moment, as always, of course, and say thank you to the audience for stopping by and being with us on the show. As always, if you did take something away from today's discussion, well, make sure you subscribe then to the show on whichever platform you checked us out on today. That way you never miss out on another great episode. And you can always travel back and check out prior episodes where Scott, Matt, and I, we dive into these deep wealth management topics so that you and yours come out better for it on the other side and really have some considerations for your own financial world. Before Scott and Matt, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Path to Abundant Living.